So welcome to week 2. So first thing we'll do is I'm going to just spend a few minutes talking about our class community because I think it's really important when you're in an online setting that you get to know some of the people that you are learning with. I'm also going to talk to you about some Zoom tips and tricks. So I thought of a couple of things after we left last time. Some of us are probably still new to using Zoom a lot. Even with the pandemic, it's still kind of a newer tool to a lot of us. So if I can support you in getting up and running with that, that would be useful to this class and others. We will again talk a little bit about the course expectations and the notion of a flipped classroom. So if that's a new term to you, I would love to chat a little bit about that tonight. I will pause for a moment and tell you, I promised like less tech issues tonight, but if you can hear like a herd of elephants stomping around, those are my children, and I have a basement office. So I might have internet the entire time, but I will also have children stomping around like it's their job. As soon as I was like, just try to be a little bit quiet between 5 and 6. And they were like, oh, invitation to be insane. And that's what's happening. I also want to talk about managing your time and workload. And one of the reasons I wanted to approach that is because a lot of you said in your intros that this is new, right? Learning all online is new. This is going to be something that's a bit challenging. A lot of you admitted to being a procrastinator. So am I. I am the queen of procrastination. My greatest accomplishment, aside from completing that master's degree, was that I actually handed in everything on time. So my undergrad was just a mess of overdue. Like, I hear you. So if you procrastinate, I got you. Let's do this together and we'll hold hands virtually and figure this out. I want to talk a little bit more about prompt responses tonight. And then our week 2 content and how we can apply that to our prompt responses. And then finally, we'll end with what's up next. So I think we're probably looking at about an hour class tonight, and that will be typical. I understand that everybody has a life, and if things happen that prevent you from attending some of our classes, no problem. But when you are here, I would love for you to participate. So just try to keep that in mind. So when it comes to our class community, I took all of your responses and I kind of threw them into a little word bubble here. Some of them I took out because some of the words were just, those sort of filler words, but I wanted to kind of get a feel for like who we are and what is important to us. So you can see here, obviously, that, goals, and I know that was a part of your assignment, certainly, but setting goals was something that was important to a lot of you. The idea of family, that was really critical. Somebody is calling my child on Messenger. The idea, but I also liked those other keywords that really popped out to me, things like everyone and that family. We have a lot of cat and dog lovers in this class. The feeling of we have a mom, we have dads, we have that sort of real community here. So if there are ways that you can kind of make that effort to get to know each other, this will be a really beneficial part of learning together online. I noticed last week, I think some of you mentioned that you're in a Facebook group together or a WhatsApp group. Such a great place for you to kind of share and collaborate. And as long as that's kept as like a positive place that you can all kind of share tips and tricks and suggestions as you move through the term, I think that's awesome. So I'm loving reading the introduction. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to do that. And we'll continue. I know you've still got a few more days for that. So I look forward to reading some more. I mentioned a little bit about Zoom tips and tricks last week. When your camera is available, try to use it. It's so much nicer seeing your faces and being able to actually talk to you than it is with a bunch of black and white names. I totally get that your life might be a mess, or I don't know where you are right now and what's going on. But when you have the opportunity, that's great. In particular for breakout rooms, it's really tricky when you're just kind of in a small breakout room and you're talking to yourself. One of the other things that's like a little tip is if you are sick of looking at your own face because you're in Zoom meetings all day, and that's a thing, right? It's like looking in the mirror all day. Like nobody wants to do that. You can click on the little 3 dots next to your name and hide self view. So that means you can't like check how you're looking as you give expressions to folks, but you can get rid of your own face, which is sometimes a welcome change. I don't know what you think, but I'm in like 8 hours of Zoom calls all day. So the last thing I want to do is like stare at myself in the mirror. I mentioned this again last week, but and I can see Bali is showing us a good example. But if you can, and you don't have to put your camera on, but if you, and in fact, when you have your camera off, you're going to prove my example. But if you can upload a headshot when you do turn your camera off, that's also just kind of a nice welcome way that we can still sort of get to know you. And then do remember that our meetings are recorded, but so is the chat. So in case somebody hasn't told you that, chatting, it like when I left last week and I disappeared and you all went to the chat and you were like, where is she? What happened to her? That lady's nuts. And like, I could read that afterwards. So nobody said anything like incriminating or upsetting or anything, but I just wanted to give you the heads up. Those chats are recorded. And I believe even if you DM somebody, like you directly message someone when you're in a group Zoom, it technically picks that up too. So just a heads up so you don't get yourself in a situation that you don't want to be in. I also wanted to note that throughout this class, you will be expected to ideally mute your mic when you're not speaking. I love to know about your pets and your families and all that, but we don't want to hear them every week. Participate in the chat and conversation when prompted. It's such a big part of learning online. I know it's tough. I know it feels awkward and it's weird. And it would be really different if we were all in person. And I wish we were a lot of the times, but when you can make the effort to participate, it really goes a long way. If you ever need to share your screen, we're actually going to try a couple of just Zoom things tonight. Just to get us comfortable with that, because one of the things I find is that we get into those situations where we're like, I need you to do fill in the blank, whether it's share your screen or annotate or whatever. And we spend so long figuring out how to do it that the exercise is kind of lost. So if you haven't already done those things, I'll invite you to try tonight in a couple of different ways, whether it's just sort of sharing your screen in a breakout room, whether it's annotating on a slide that I have coming up. That would be really helpful as well. Finally, if you want to react, you can show little reactions as we are moving through our time together, or raise your hand. And again, we're a small group, so jump in and talk if you want to. Breakout rooms, have we been in breakout rooms probably already? Some of us? Okay. So I will occasionally do breakout rooms. It's much easier and quite like nicer to kind of chat with, a handful of other people rather than many. So that will be a good opportunity. Alexia, what does that reaction mean? Are you?
No, I accidentally pressed the button.
Oh, I was like, I don't even know what that is. No, like, it's because you heard my kids stomping around and then you put like a shoe. Yeah. But this is good though, right? Because you get into those things where you have to do this and you don't know how. Like, that's what I find is I'll get to a thing and I'm like, okay, everybody get ready to annotate. And they're like, I can't do it. I can't share my screen. I don't know how to do this. So it's nice to practice when you don't have to. And then finally, what I was just talking about, the need to annotate on occasion. So that just means that typically, I'm actually not even seeing it on my screen right now, which is funny. But typically at the top of your screen, you should have the option to annotate and write on the presenter screen. So if you go up to the top where it says you're viewing, it should say, I believe you're viewing Lindsay's screen, you should be able to click to annotate. So we'll get to that if that's not working yet or you haven't seen it. We were all here last week for this, so I won't spend any time on that, but just reminder that we're focusing on that critical thinking. We're focusing on that, those opportunities to write and communicate more effectively. And that will continually be our mission throughout the course, is that we are looking at those short pieces of writing and we are responding to it. I'll also just spend a moment here again. I know we talked about it last time, but I know grades are important. So here is where you are spending the bulk load of your time is on those prompt responses. We're going to go over one together tonight so that you get a good feel for exactly how that prompt response happens. Additionally, that goal setting and reflection, thank you to those of you who have already done it. I think everybody did exactly what was expected, including defining 2 to 3 goals, which can be tough sometimes. So thank you for taking the time to that, and everybody will receive full marks for those efforts. This engagement part, though, is kind of what I want to focus on, because not only does it mean showing up for class whenever possible, but it also means interacting with that course material online. So given the opportunity, can we go over that stuff? And I'm trying to arrange this class in such a way that you have a good feel for how much time it will take you. So hopefully that is helpful, and you will be able to do some of that, interact with some of the course content prior to arriving each week. Any questions about the assessments? Okay, there'll probably be lots as they go throughout the term, so please don't hesitate. Do we know, does me saying the word flipped classroom mean anything to anybody? Is that like a new term or something that we might have heard before? It's relatively new. So I just wanted to sort of give you my vision for this class. And it's different because we would have been in class if, under different circumstances. So typically what you're used to doing, and especially for those of you coming from high school or a more traditional college classroom, is you're used to that lecture, right? And your teacher spends that time talking to you about stuff, and they teach, and then you go home and you do homework activities. Or you perhaps break out into groups, but it's typically followed by a lecture. When it comes to what a flipped classroom looks like, we try to give a little bit of that lecture beforehand. So that might take place online. So that means, you might have to read a little bit beforehand. You might have to watch a couple of videos beforehand. And that way, when you come to class, you can actually chat, participate, ask questions, and it can be really active information, or an active session rather. I am leaning towards this way of facilitating this class for a couple of reasons. One of them is because if we were in class, for sure, things would look really different and we would do things really differently. When we are in an online setting, it makes it really challenging. And to me, like, your time is valuable. I'm happy you're here. I know that you have to avoid whatever dinner, or you can't work during this hour, or there's a lot of other things that you could be doing at 5 o'clock. I don't really want to walk through slides every week and just talk at you when I know that you could do that on your own. So my thought process with a lot of this is that I will post that material beforehand. I've seen your schedule and it looks like you should have some time before Wednesday to navigate through it. Maybe you don't. I can try to post our material a little bit earlier. But that's my goal, is that you'll be able to kind of go through some of that course material prior to arriving to class. And that way you can show up with questions, you can show up with, the opportunity to apply some of those concepts, and we can go over some of that together. Does that make sense? It might be a little bit different than what you're doing in some of your classes, but I have always found it's really tricky. And in particular in this, like, for me to ask you to come here and put your camera on, I want to see your face. And then I'm just like, let me share 42 slides with you. I feel like that's not fair to you. So if you can kind of do some of it beforehand, that will be, a better use of our time together. And then when we're live, it will make sense for us to be together and share and go over that stuff. Are there any questions about that? How do we feel about, and I'll need you to, you can post in the chat, or you can annotate if you can figure out how, whatever works for you, but how is posting that information on Monday morning, does that mean that you will typically have the opportunity to interact with it by Wednesday at 5? Is that reasonable? Sometimes?
Yeah, it was pretty hard to, once we just got it half an hour before class or something, to just stop everything and look at it.
Right, but Monday, I'll never do that. I'll always be Monday at 8. So that would be okay. So Lauren, if you're talking about, I posted a document today, is that what you mean? Yeah, that was because I want it for this class. So you were not expected to touch that. So always, rest assured, I will always have any content that I would love for you to explore before class. I will post that by Monday at 8 a.m. I can try to push that though, like if it works better for you. I just want to also be respectful of your weekends, right? I think you should embrace weekends and be good with them, and ideally not spend a ton of time on school. So my thought is if I can get it to you Monday, that would be good. And yes, if you ever get one of those, like something was just posted that's a couple minutes before class, that is because I'm using it in class, not because I expect you to stop everything you're doing and read it. That would be the worst. Although I have had that before where somebody sends me an agenda and they're like, here you go, we're meeting in 3 minutes. I'm like, so I won't do that, I promise. So that's kind of my thought process for that. So I'm just going to stop sharing for a second here. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to end my screen share for a moment though. And I will share this instead. There's so many things happening right now. There's people in the waiting room. Maya is back. Okay. So this is what you will be used to doing. I mentioned it. Did anybody else get like, I don't know. I know that we're all kind of localish. Like Sunday was a crazy storm. Right as and this is a prime example of why you shouldn't procrastinate. Because I was like, I've got all Sunday night. I'm going to make a video for my class. I want it to be fresh. I'm going to really say I enjoyed the weekend, blah, blah, blah. Like I didn't want to lie about it and do it Friday when I was actually doing it Sunday. And then the power went out on Sunday and here you go. So I gave you a cat meme because that's all that I could manage from my phone. Typically you will get a welcome video each week though, and I'll kind of walk you through what's expected because that will help you to manage your time for the week. So if we navigate over to our week 2 though, this is what I am trying to do so that you'll have this checklist that you can go through each week. And ideally you'll spend that time and kind of check those items off before you head to class. If I click back to our week though, one of the other things that I'm trying this term, and totally open to feedback on this, so please let me know. With each of these items though, I've kind of put your estimated reading time. I think this will probably take you about 7 minutes. This will probably take you 10, 4, and then 2. So all said and done, we're looking at like 25 minutes of prep time before class. And if you take some notes, it might stretch that out to about a half hour. But that would be pretty standard, I hope, is that I'll give you a few things to navigate through. And this won't happen every week. Like some weeks I'll just say, just show up and be yourself. But a lot of weeks, this will kind of be what I expect. And I'll continue to post that time so that you know, okay, I've only got 7 minutes right now. I'm going to pop in. I'll do that close reading. I'll check that off. And then move on to the next activity when you have the opportunity. Any questions about that? Okay. So I will pop back over here again. And I'll pause here. And again, we'll look for questions in the chat. You can annotate if you can figure out how, for most of us, it should be that thing at the top. It should give you the opportunity to annotate. What we talked a little bit about managing our time. A lot of us mentioned it live when we talked last week. A lot of us, perfect. Lexia is going to be like the superstar of all of these things, just like posting like really irrelevant things like shoes and like a line. She'll be like, I got this. And I love that. This is what I want. I want this to be like, do your thing while you're in here. And that way, when it's like real high stakes, like somebody's grading what you're doing, you got this. A lot of you though talked about managing your time. And I mentioned, procrastinating and just overall, it's really hard to learn online. I totally get it. I just finished my master's program all online. And it's a really different feel than learning in class. When you see each other on campus and you've got to be in a physical classroom at 5 o'clock, it feels really different than just kind of like opening up your laptop and, doing that from anywhere in your home. So I get that. So if you've got those chances to connect in that, it's going to help you a lot. The other thing though will be managing your time. So Are there things that are working well? Are there things that you're struggling with? I would invite you can come off mute. You can write it on our annotation here. You can put it in the chat. I just kind of want to think as a group, what works well? How are you managing your time? What do you think you need to do to be successful as an online student? And if you're still figuring that out, that's okay. That's why we're here.
I can mention something.
Yeah, please.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I really like your idea of letting us have our weekends to do whatever we want. So can you talk to our other teachers about that?
I'll try, I promise.
Okay. Yeah, so organization, I think, is my biggest downfall. So this year I bought a binder and I have it, like, you can kind of see it's color coded.
I like it.
So like each subject, I just turn to it and I can start writing my notes. And then for assignments, like, I'm still deciding how to, because assignments are kind of all over the place for each teacher. So I think I'm going to say, like, I'm going to this class reason and writing. So that's number 4. So then I just flip to it, and then I'm going to put Post-it notes here. And then for each assignment, and then just pull the Post-it note when I finished the subject.
I love it. So super.
It's my game plan. And then also a paper planner. So just so I have my calendar with my volunteer stuff, so that I keep that separate from school. And then my daily calendar is all school stuff and like social events. So it's a lot easier to manage than like a phone digital calendar, which just has my schedule. Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great. And really ambitious to kind of like think about how you can prioritize things. And like, I love that Lauren mentions too, like, you have a life, right? Like that's again, like, a student is a very small part of what you do day to day. It's a big thing, of course. And I'm so happy that you're here. But I mean, most of you are working from the sounds of it. Some of you have kids. Some of you are dealing with other family members. A lot of you have pets. Like, it's okay for this to be like an aspect of your life, but prioritizing it is really great. So if you can kind of fit in and fitness, for those of you who joined a little bit late, Kayla and I were talking about like Kyle, and I don't know, people have been like, I'm pretty sure Kyle's trying to hurt us. One of my students last semester in 1089, sorry if you're hearing this twice, and we're already here, but I saw her one day and I'm like, Melissa, what's happening? Where are you? And she's like, I'm in bed. And I was like, what? And she was just like, I can't move, Lindsay. I don't know what to do. You want me to come to class? You want my camera on? I'm like, well, you can turn it off, I guess. Like, she was so done after a couple of Kyle's classes that she was like, I'm not doing this anymore. But she went on to do really well. So she did stick with it. So just kind of thinking about how you can manage that time, knowing that fitness is really important to you, and that's going to be a priority in this class. Thinking about prioritizing color-coded binders. I'm all about color coding things. I always get like the paper planners, and I get like stickers, and I like highlight things. I don't generally keep with it, but I have a solid good week of using stickers and stuff. And then I abandon it. And then next year I'm like, I'll do it again. It's like always a New Year's resolution. So be more like Lauren. That will be our motto. Anybody else who's finding things to be challenging? Are we doing okay with our time overall? Okay. As I said, I will continue to try to post estimated time. I'm not trying, and I'm not pulling those numbers out of nowhere. I'm putting based on the number of words, I'm putting them into like a little search engine sort of thing. And it pops out like an estimated based on average reading time. Okay, so if you take a little bit longer to read, or you're a little bit speedier, then that might help you. But just so you know, that's kind of how I'll continue to do things, so that you can take a glance on Monday morning and go, okay, I've got about 25 minutes and I need to find time to do that before Wednesday at 5. So again, whether that's, 6 or 4 blocks of 6 minutes, I don't care how you do it. Just try to make an effort.
Okay, so prompt responses. We talked about these last week. Does anybody want to tell me what you think they are? And I'll give you the answer quickly, so don't worry if we're not sure. Anybody?
The essays.
Yeah, no, tell me about these essays. How do we write them?
We write them with 5 paragraphs: a beginning, middle, 3 body paragraphs, and conclusion.
Amazing. And in response to a prompt.
Some sort of prompt, yeah.
Yeah. So that is what you'll be doing, right? Is these short articles establishing your thoughts and your positions. You're going to agree or disagree, and then you're just going to tell me about it. So that will be what you are used to doing every week that we have a prompt. Anybody remember how many we have to write throughout the term?
6.
Yes. And how many do I not? I was going to say I don't care about. I care about them all, but how many are we going to drop?
4.
No. How many we're gonna keep?
Sorry,
Is that what you
2,
answered?
2.
Okay,
Yeah, we're gonna
good.
keep 4.
Perfect. I was like, no, that's not June. Yeah, we're gonna get rid of 2. So if your first 2 you're not thrilled with, big deal. They didn't happen. And then we'll just continue to improve on those next ones. So Noah already said it for us. What should your response look like? It should have an introduction. We should be starting with an opening sentence and a signal phrase. We talk about that next week, and we talk about it in preparation for your sample prompt. That signal phrase, though, is typically like in the article, Cats versus Dogs, the author, Amy Weinberg, states that, and you state that author's opinion, and then you continue on. So that signal phrase, anytime I use the word signal phrase, it means you're signaling, this is not my word. These are not my words. I'm going to use words from the article. So you're going to put quotation marks around them. You're going to introduce them as the author's words, or you're going to introduce the article to begin with. So that is a signal phrase. And again, we talk about that next week. Then you're going to summarize the author's essay and their point. So what were they talking about? And then finally, your thesis. Ideally, your thesis has 3 points to it. So I'm going to argue about this, and here are the 3 reasons. And then I'm going to tell you about my points, and I'm going to use evidence from the article, tell you again, and use evidence again, and use evidence. So a lot of people will get through much of this class and avoid actually looking at the prompt very much. So sometimes you see something that gets you fired up and you're like, I have things to say about this. And then you just go on a tangent. I love that about you. And I'm so happy that you're passionate, but let's make sure that we're responding to that, right? So that is where I find the people who struggle with the prompt responses, typically it's the ones that really resonate with them, right? If you're really passionate about animal care, and I give you one about that, you're probably going to kind of go down a path because you've got a lot to say. Whereas if I give you something that matters not so much to you, baseball, then that will be a little bit, you'll kind of stick to a form, like to a structure, because you have no choice. So in each of those, we need to really be thinking about how you can make a point, what evidence you're going to use from the article, and then you'll move on to that next point. And then finally, at the end, simply summarizing what you said, and then concluding a concluding sentence that restates your thesis. And so that seems like a lot when I blab on about it for that amount of time, but really we're looking for 25 sentences. So if you can kind of keep that goal of having each of your paragraphs like 5 to 7 sentences, then you're going to be maybe doing like 25, 35 sentences in total. And all of this is done within 70 minutes. Okay, so you read that first and then respond to it. So we'll have an opportunity to look at what a prompt looks like tonight. And then next week, you go over a sample prompt response, and it's in FOL, it's in the same system that you'd be used to using, except I'm not grading it, but we can totally talk about it. Okay.
I have a question.
So, yeah.
I apologize because I didn't actually look at the. Sorry, I have kids.
That's okay.
I didn't look at the slideshows or anything, but is this posted in the content?
No. So this will be after, I'll post it by the end of the evening tonight, like by midnight. But it's not there yet, Kayla. No.
Okay.
But this would be a good one to draw attention to. So I'll pull this out in addition to posting it in FOL.
Thank you.
It's okay. We've all done that before, where we've done like, stop it, whether it's your roommate or your pet or your child. Okay. So again, keeping in mind that I don't think many of you looked at the stuff this week beforehand. I'm not going to drag this out and be really painful. Did anybody read about closed reading? Do we know what that means? A little bit? Yeah. Does anybody want to share any thoughts there? Okay. So this is what we'll try to do each week, right? So that's why I'll make sure that I'm clear about like how much time it will take you so that we won't, I won't be painfully trying to pull things away from you. So we were introduced to a concept called close reading this week. And what that means is that you're not just randomly going through something and kind of speed reading through a book or an article or a news briefing or social media post. You're pausing for a moment. And I would invite you to do this with anything. And in fact, I will invite you to do this with anything at some point this term, where, as I mentioned, it could be something on Instagram where you are looking at it and it's this big blurb that author, the poster has put as their Instagram caption. And how do we work with that information? What do we do with it? A lot of times we just read it and move on, right? We continue swiping through our feed and we don't care about it. When it comes to this class, you don't have a lot of time to interact with the readings that you get, right? Because you've got to read them and then you've got to respond to them really quickly. But what we ideally will be able to do is we will annotate our experience, which means that as you're reading through, you're kind of taking notes at the side. The author's making this point. The author said this. Here's the main idea. And you would just kind of jot down some points. You're always welcome if you have access to a printer and you want to print your prompt responses. That's a great thing to do. And you can kind of make notes on the side or highlight it. You also want to take notice. So you want to be paying attention to like the tone. You want to be paying attention to the words that the author has used, the way that they're communicating it, perhaps any biases that they have, right? We want to question, who is this author? Why are they talking to us about this? In the same way that if you go to Instagram and you look at a post, you want to be questioning the source of that, right? This person is saying, is spreading this information. Who are they though? What do I need to know about them in order for me to, evaluate whether or not this information is credible and truthful? And then be granular. And one of the things that we can do to be granular, which is like really looking at the details, is listing out things like the interesting words, definitions of new words. Are there words that mean the same thing, but they've used them twice, or contrasting words? So in our text, it suggests doing like 7 to 10 per each group of these words. That will probably take you a while and might not be necessary, but these things are important. And when I think about this group in particular, why would any of this stuff matter? I'm thinking about your group. I'm thinking about what you want to do with your career. Where can we kind of draw parallels between this and make connections between this and what you will ultimately end up doing in the field? Any question or any thoughts about that? Maybe that's it. I'm not sure if I'm phrasing that question poorly. But this matters, right? You can't show up to the scene of a crime and be like, pretty sure I know what happened, and then write it down and move on with your life. You're going to want to take notice of these things, right?
I believe basically to understand a small, detailed, sometimes we miss out any small points, and then the small point would be like something pretty important.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it would be really interesting if we kind of like paired these to like more of our like police talk. I should get together with Liz and say like, what exactly would we do? Because you would want to be making notes about things, right? Whether that evidence takes place by capturing it with a camera, or if you're simply taking notes, what do you take notice of and how detailed do you have to be? right? We get to that point where, you know, there could be evidence of a crime and we can kind of wash it off and say, well, I'm pretty sure this is how it happened. But then as the investigation continues, you find out a lot more. So we're going to do the same thing when we're writing as well, and when we're reading. So these are important things for us to be keeping in mind. Lauren, were you going to say something too?
I was just, or like sentence structure as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So what kind of, how are they phrasing and communicating with us? That's all really key. And that would be important to me when I do this to your work, right? So I'm going to close read yours and I'm going to think about, like, I will annotate. I'll spend some time in the margins and thinking about that. I'll certainly be taking notice of things like your sentence structure. And are you using some different words, or is it kind of like that same word is repeated 30 times throughout? These are good ways to just add some variety to your writing. The other item that we looked at this week is called logical fallacies. And then I found this really cool graphic, and I love this more than what I asked you to read. So this will be posted and you can take a peek at that later. But logical fallacies are something that we explore because we see a lot of them, but we're not always sure how to identify them. And truth be told, I'm not super interested in you being able to identify a hasty generalization versus a ad hominem, but you need to understand those when you see them. So taking the example of these robots, robots should take over the world. Okay, now state your arguments about this. And if you look at the little arguments that these people or these robots are saying, and your screen might be too small to do this, so I'm just going to read to you a couple of them. So the first one, our little orange robot in the first top corner says, I have met a few people and I conclude that all humans are ugly, evil, and smell like socks. That's a hasty generalization because you've met a few people and those few people happen to be. So when we think about this in writing and we think more of a college level and academic and thinking a little bit more deeply, we've probably heard hasty generalizations from people, right? Whether it's about a prejudice that they might have, or and certainly could be something that affects you in the police force as well, sort of making a generalization about, you know, like, oh, the kids from that end of the city, right? This is how, well, you've met a handful and that's not representative of the entire population in that area, right? So there are items like that that we're going to want to be weary of and pay attention to. And the ones that we talk about most and that are called out in our reading this week are that idea of the hasty generalization and then this ad hominem. So again, I conclude you should not be debating me while you were malfunctioning. So we're attacking you and not your actual argument. So those are a couple of things that we could be thinking about and things that will be present in some of the prompts that we read. So authors might say things that really have no factual basis. And as readers of that information, we want to be able to think critically about it and identify some of these issues. So the other item that I offered this week was a short video, and it was 5 tips to improve your critical thinking. So again, when you come to that point where you are looking at a prompt response, how are you going to think about that prompt response? And here are some tips for you. So whether you're thinking about a question that you might have that about the author's work, if you are then going to gather some information, so you're not just going to take those words at face value, you're going to think a little bit more about that. You are going to ask more questions, right? And think more about the problem. What exactly is the author communicating? What sort of things should I be paying attention to? Considering the implications of what points you might have or ideas that you're formulating, the message that the author is giving, and then finally, other points of view. And so this is the one that's really key. And I think about you in the police force, but I think about you just as a student and as a human. People might have ideas about something, and us being able to explore other points of view is really critical, right? To being a global citizen, to being a effective member of a police force, that is really key. So let's be thinking about how we can critically think through our prompts, and then just in general. And then finally, the other item that you were given was sort of a how to spot fake news. And that is something that continues to be important. Fake news is kind of an interesting term that we've come up with over the last few years. But again, us being able to question things and not just take everything at face value is really critical to our role in society. So thinking about that, and there's a short infographic on our FOL site that walks you through a couple of tips for spotting fake news. So that is all I have to say for this part this evening. I am going to ask that you spend, and I think we're still in good time to do this, that you spend about 10 minutes. I'm going to put you into 2 breakout rooms. And so when that pops up on the screen for us to join a breakout room, do that. And what you will be doing is that little piece of information that Lauren noted was published like right before class. It's because you need it for this exercise. So in our Fanshawe online course in week 2, the first item in week 2 right now is a prompt. Okay, it is about students managing their time. So that first item there is now a prompt, and it's a typical prompt. It's one that you could actually get. You won't get it because I'm giving it to you as this exercise, but it is an actual prompt that other students might be getting while taking this course. And I just want you to kind of think critically about it. So you'll probably take a couple minutes to read it. It's okay if if it takes you a little bit longer to read things and you don't have the time to read it all, you can still be a part of the group discussion. So take a couple minutes to read it. And then let's think about some of the concepts that we went over this week. If you close read that prompt, what might you put in the margins? What are you making note of? What are you finding? What's important? What's not important? Are there words you don't know? Awesome if you don't know a word, because you're always going to be able to use a dictionary. So that's really key, is being able to do that and being exposed to new vocabulary. And then are there any of those logical fallacies? Is there anything in there that you're kind of like, I should question the way that this author is saying that? That doesn't seem quite right. Perhaps they've made a hasty generalization about something or a personal attack because of the way that they've phrased something. So just be thinking about the items that we just talked about and that you will have the chance to review if you can make those 25 minutes to kind of look through week 2 content and think about how you can apply it to the prompt response. So I'm going to put you into 2 groups and that will be your job. Okay, so close reading. So that annotate your experience, take notice, be granular. So there might be words that you are making note of, and then thinking about the author's message. If you haven't already, this would be a great one to take a quick screenshot of so that you know what you need to do when you get there. So yeah, your phones or doing a quick screenshot. And as I mentioned, we'll probably spend, I'm actually just going to put you in there for about 7 minutes so that I'll be true to our word of trying to leave on time tonight. But when you come back, I am going to ask that you think a little bit about some of the stuff and that you're able to share it with me. And then our final slide and time together today is just talking about what's next. Okay. Does everybody understand what they need to do?
Ma'am, quick question, ma'am.
Yeah.
Are we going to discuss about the overscheduled kids? What you have just sent? Okay.
Yeah, it's exactly that. So as I move back here, I put it right at the top. So yes, anytime I ever do that, never panic. And I'm sorry if you got a million notifications about me adding stuff over the weekend. I can't turn that off. But this is the one that you're looking at. So if you are in your groups together, someone can share a screen if they want. If you annotate while sharing a screen, you do need to save it. So it doesn't save anywhere unless you choose to save it. So just be aware of that. Sometimes my students are like, maybe they're not telling the truth. I don't know. They're like, oh, we annotated everywhere. We did all this stuff. And then it's like, it disappeared. It does disappear. So you don't need to read this part, but this is what you'll be asked to do each week. So in a multi-paragraph response with your intro, body, conclusion, respond to the article below. In a perfect world, and we will do this before the end of the term, and it will be so exciting, you are not only going to summarize the author's argument, you'll critically respond to it, and you will probably find a way to also consider at least one objection. So when we talked about close reading and we talked about critical thinking, and you think about the other point of view, this will be really important, and it'll come into play later in the class. So this author says all this stuff. What would you say in return? And you can disagree or agree with the author, and you can bring up another point as well. Okay, so you can kind of be just thinking about it in general. So I'm just talking, I'm wasting our time. This is how much you would have to read. So this could be an example of a real prompt. You'd have to read through this and be making notes of some things as you move through. So that is pretty typical. And then next week, I will walk you through actually completing a prompt response and what that looks like. Is everybody okay for right now? Yeah, Lauren.
Sorry. How do I annotate, on the website?
When you are, if you're screen sharing, or even just if you're not, like you could annotate here.
So how did you do that? Like,
sorry. Yeah. So I think at the very top of your screen, is that where everybody who was making your smiley faces and stuff earlier? Yes. Beautiful. Is it at the top, Alexia? Is that how I say your name? Okay. So at the very top, there should be a option to annotate.
View options and then click annotate.
Okay.
Do you see that?
It says you are viewing Lindsay Shipman's screen. It's
yeah.
like the green bar, and then you see view options.
Okay.
Click on it and then annotate.
Thank you. It's hard. I can't coach you because the presenter view looks totally different. So
I just have options, and then when I click on it, it says original size or enter full screen. That's all it gives me.
I'm not sure. I will try to film a quick video when I'm a participant in the meeting, and that way I can walk you through what that should look like, Kayla. But it could be a limitation of the browser or something too. I'm not really sure, but you also don't have to worry about it. If you just want to jot down some notes and then come back and share, perfect. You don't need to share a screen. You don't need to make this like fancy and official. I just want you to spend a couple minutes. Every time I do this, I'm like, we've got no time left. You spend 2 minutes reading, read it quickly, and just chat about it a little bit. A couple of the things that we're talking about. Okay. I will put you in those rooms because it's easier, to have conversations in that way. If you need me though, just click on help and I will pop up. Do you guys watch The Good Place? I'll be like, Janet, does nobody know what I mean? Oh, that makes me sad.
I like the actress, but I just couldn't get into the show.
You have to just keep trying, Lauren. It gets really good. But in The Good Place, this person just shows up anytime something is needed, and that will be like me. But you don't get it, so it's not funny. Anyways, I'm putting you in breakout rooms. Let me know if you need me, and I will bring you back here in 6 minutes, okay? But I'll warn you when you've got a minute left. So I'm gonna do 3 rooms, and then that's perfect because that puts 4 of you in each one, and you'll get an invitation to join. And then let me know if you need me, and I will pop into each of them too to make sure that you're all good. There's always one group that's like, I'm not leaving till I'm kicked out. So we will wait for those folks then. Awesome. Wonderful. You all made it back. So thank you for experimenting. As you can see, part of Zoom is just getting used to the technology behind things, right? And like how we can use those things. So I spend, like I said, a solid 6 hours on Zoom every day, and yet still have these moments where I'm like, am I screen sharing? Or like you're accidentally sharing the wrong screen or private messages or whatever. So it's a good way to kind of be in smaller groups and sort of think about some of that stuff. You all successfully screen shared though. So yay, we're learning so many things tonight and I feel good about it. That was kind of the main point though, right? Is sort of getting used to one of those functions on Zoom that you should know how to do. This will be something that you'll be asked to do, is to be a part of those breakout rooms, to use some annotation, to be able to participate in those chats, do those reactions. Hopefully that is a little bit helpful to go over that stuff. So if it took most of your time to figure out how to share a screen or what the activity was, I understand that you might not have a lot to report right now, but general findings. I would love to hear from each of the three groups. So if you have a spokesperson or somebody who is brave and wants to share, that would be great.
I can share from my group.
Awesome. Thanks, Kayla.
So the findings I found in the whole thing was, I don't think the person that was writing it, the author, had children. So that was my one guess. So a lot of his points are, like James said, was biased. And a lot of them didn't make sense either, because they were, okay, be a princess in a different room. Part of the I have no clue what the heck I was just saying, sorry.
That's okay.
Part of it was saying that children are in school for 8 hours a day. Now I skimmed right through it, so I didn't get every single word.
Yeah.
But it said that didn't have time for the other activities like music, art, and physical. But they actually have that in class, in schools.
Right.
So they have no aspect of a child's or their education at all.
Okay.
I'm gonna let other people speak now.
Yeah.
Because
You go deal with your princess. No problem. Who else? What else do we think? And remember, there's no pressure here, just initial thoughts upon reading it. What did you think? Did you agree with the author? Did you disagree? Did you agree with parts and not with others? Yeah, Nathan, sorry.
I thought like kind of who's paying this girl? Like, I don't know. I thought it was all like very like capitalistic. Like they all want, this girl just wants us to like go in a line and just everybody does the exact same thing.
Okay.
It was solid. But also like I partly agree with it. Like I think kids should be doing like something after school. But I think it should be more like their choice. Like I know I grew up a lot with sports, and that was like good for me, like good for your mental health and like good staying in. But like you shouldn't have to like force your kid into that, and it should be like their choice of like what sport it is, or if they don't want to do a sport, like maybe something else like music or whatever was mentioned.
Okay. Yeah, so this would be like if you're thinking about how you might I'll leave this up. I might move the order of it because it's bugging me that it's at the top, but I'll leave it in our week 2. If you want to take a look at this and you're keen to write a 5-paragraph essay on it, think about what you might make your points about, right? So you're going to introduce it by saying, here was the author's. So you would introduce the name of the author and the prompt. You would say, here's her general opinion. And then you would say, you know, the author is wrong because, or the author was incorrect to argue this because, and then you would develop your point that goes along with it, right? So what would those points look like? So again, if we go and we think about, Nathan is saying, sports could be beneficial, but we can't force them. Like that might be a whole premise of one of his paragraphs. So this would be a way that we're going to kind of dissect that and think about how we're going to respond to each of her points. I think at least one more. Does anybody else have any other thoughts about this?
I was just going to say that I think this person's like pretty lonely.
Okay.
Just by the way they're kind of making arguments because they're talking about let's see, I think in the second last paragraph, they said, furthermore, the family time argument is weak. What is productive about a family hanging around together? So I'm going to assume that this person probably didn't have that strong of a family tie
Sure.
growing up, nor do they probably have that great of a social life with friends, because I think there's a value in being around people and talking with others.
Yeah.
So this person obviously seems to be much more like, they would probably fit, I'm going to assume from my perspective, it would probably fit more like the business world, where it's basically like, let's get the work done, get the work done. That's all they think about. It's just making, time to get a bigger paycheck for next week, not really taking the time to sit down and be appreciative of the people they have around them.
Yeah.
Sort of deal.
Yeah, that could be.
All I got.
If I can play devil's advocate and think about what you just said though, Jake, let's be really careful when we are formulating some opinions, because sometimes when we respond, and I've seen people do it a lot, where they'll just say, that wouldn't be a point that you would actually make. Like, this person is a loser and nobody wants to hang out with them. Like, that would not be a good way for us to actually structure it, even though it might be what you're thinking. We're going to want to make sure that we just phrase that in such a way that it doesn't become like a personal attack on what the author is saying. So I know that you wouldn't necessarily do that, but that is one of the logical fallacies that we talk about that you want to also avoid in your writing. So we make it really clear that we want to attack thoughts and opinions and argue against those versus the person who is saying them.
All right, cool. Fair enough.
Yeah. But I hear you, and you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I'm putting to Jake, though. I didn't say she's lonely. You did. Who else? Anybody else before we wrap up? Nathan, did you have a...
Yeah, I feel like you learn a lot of stuff outside of school too. Like, I know a lot of people that are very school smart, but just don't have the common sense outside of school.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you learn a lot in school, but a lot of like the deeper like life lessons and stuff you learn outside of school from experience and being out there, and yeah.
Yeah. So again, like, this could be something saying like, yeah, like, you do want to learn outside of school. We do want students involved in this stuff, like day to day, like this is important. And here's why. So it sounds like that might be, and you can do whatever you want with any of the prompts I give to you. Even if you actually feel one way or the other, you can choose to argue and say, I disagree with this author. You won't say I, will try to avoid first person, but you can say the author's point is invalid because, and you will list off your 3 points and then you will describe them. Or you might say the author makes excellent points because, and then you would list off those 3 points. So all of these elements that we're kind of bringing together is great. And when we explore a little bit deeper, the thing that we'll be doing is we'll be looking to pull quotations out of it. So what exactly did the author say? And you'll integrate those into your response too. So, where Braithwaite says life is short, there are only 7 days in a week. What we might argue is that, yes, indeed, life is short. However, and you can kind of go on from there, right? But we want to make sure that we're using those authors' words so that we are spotlighting their words in particular.
I would like to add
Yeah,
one point. I would disagree with the author.
Okay.
Point of view that the kids are overscheduled. I believe if the kids have something to do, they will develop their cognitive skills even better. When they participate in education or sports, or they are busy, they can even have a family time where they can their families can participate with the kids.
Yeah, so absolutely. So that is, so sorry, did you say that you do agree for the?
No.
You don't, okay. So as long as you're, sorry, I'm thinking and writing at the same time, I can't do both. Yeah, so I mean, whatever, and like I said, I'm not gonna ever fault you on, you were supposed to agree. It doesn't matter to me. You agree or disagree, and then you argue your point. Okay. So as long as you are good at arguing that point and it's not personal attacks, you're looking at the actual words that the author has used, you're going to be well equipped for success. So this is kind of typical. I will tell you this one's a little bit longer than some of the ones that we do because I think it's important that we can kind of read through it quickly. I know for me, it takes me some time. So another reason that I kind of want to put a little bit of emphasis on reading it before you come to class, not this one, but I mean the actual work that I prescribe, doing that before class. One of the reasons is because then you can think about it a little instead of me just shouting things at you and then going, what do you think? Tell me your thoughts. That's hard to do, right? So if you look at it beforehand, you can process some thoughts, you can go over some stuff, and then you can participate in our class. Is there any other questions about just that prompt in general? Yeah, Lauren.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, so where it says, sorry, I noticed Noah was in a fighter jet, so I had to ask how fast it went. Okay, so it says your argument, your essay should consider at least one objection a reader might have to your argument. So how do we raise that objection? Because then are we pitching that objection and then expecting someone else to reply?
Yeah, great question. So this is like the ultimate, like, do you remember like trying to do things like asking your parents for permission to do something that you're like pretty sure they're going to say no to? This is how I always look at this part of the essay instructions, is that you would say something like, I have been invited to a big party this weekend and it's at so-and-so's house and I know what you're going to say. That's that moment of you saying, I know what you're going to say. And yes, their parents are going to be home, right? And you kind of put that out there because you know there's an objection. Anybody logically reading this is going to say, I don't agree with you. And here's why. So it's okay for you to introduce that contradiction and say, you know, some people might argue that children need to be overscheduled in order to be consistently stimulated. However, in fact, and so you just put that in, it can be one sentence. So this is this is something that we don't really even approach until much later in the course because it is a little bit tricky to do. But that's all I want you to do is kind of go, like when you're gearing up for an argument or there's something going on with one of your friends or you are trying to defend someone and you go, I know you think, but here's the actual reason. That's all you're doing there. And so we'll do it a little bit more eloquently than I just did, and it will be very convincing. But that's the idea. And you can just kind of insert that anywhere, Lauren. And then that's kind of ticking a box to say, this person understands that not everybody is going to feel exactly the same, but they've responded to it efficiently. And that way you remove that, because if I'm reading your whole thing and I've got a doubt in my mind the entire time, it's going to nag at me. I'd rather you acknowledge my doubt and tell me, nope, not right, and continue on. Does that make sense? Okay. And we'll cover it in a lot more detail.
Cool.
Does everybody feel okay about this sort of thing though? Like this is what we're going to be doing week over week. Next week, we'll spend some time together. And when we do, I am going to make your prompt response available to you next week, your practice prompt, and don't do it before you come to class. Okay, so this will be the one thing I tell you. Review the other information. Don't do your practice prompt. Wait until we come to class. We'll talk about it a little bit, and then you can go and do it. Okay, so don't feel like you need to rush it. I'd rather you have some time to chat about it before you have to complete that practice prompt. Any other questions before my final slide, which just defines next steps? And I told you an hour to an hour and a half each time, but technically this is a little bit longer than I expected tonight. So my apologies. And thank you all for still being here. We're good? Okay, you're like, stop talking, just move on. Okay, so what's up next? If you haven't already, and I'm looking at your faces, I think everybody here-ish has introduced themselves. If you haven't already, please do that. It's worth 5%. Okay, so introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about yourself, and defining those goals. Make sure that you do that. In the next week, we have our practice prompt response due, but I will help you with that on Wednesday next week. So do not rush ahead and do that. I got you. I will help you with that. We will all figure that out together. And then I will post your week 3 content on Monday. Keeping in mind that idea of you spending that half hour with notes maybe before you arrive at class. Are we feeling okay about Monday at 8? Okay, I will get that to you. Figure out how you're going to manage that time. I will continue to post the time. If you read something, you're like, Lindsay, this took me like an hour and you said 7 minutes. Tell me. But I think you're going to be okay with most of that stuff. Just try to look at that checklist early in the week and say, like, how can I navigate through this? If I don't want you to do something, if I'm like, just wait until class, I'll make that really clear. And short of any insane storms, you can expect a short video from me every week that just says, here's what you need to do this week. Please view them. I can tell if you viewed them. Just humor me. And if you have questions about anything, please let me know. Okay. I want this class. I know that it's challenging to like move through some of the grammar exercises, and it's a lot of work. And it's sometimes we're trying to connect the dots between all of the class content and real life and careers. But I think you can all be really successful in this class. And I think it's a great place for us to practice critical thinking and kind of move through those communication skills, which are key. So with all that, I will see you next week. If you need anything before, please let me know. Connect with me anytime, shoot me an email. I'm happy to meet with you for Zoom office hours. If you have any questions about anything, and you can always post to our course discussion area too. So if it's sort of general questions that you have, that's a great place to put them. And you can do that there. So I'll hang out for a few minutes. I'll do that after class every time. So if anybody wants to stay on and chat with me, awesome. And if not, I will see you Wednesday. Thank you.